We don't have a flag. Well, yeah, we got red, white, and blue. Mr. Amador, you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Your shirt. pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We could do roll call and introductions on the members of the commission. Social security number? Oh, that's fine.
Oh. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Oh, hey, whoa, I'm loud now. District 4, Steve Ding's my supervisor.
Good evening, Christian Alexander Santos. This is my first day. I'm an alternate board member and a resident of Stockton. Thank you.
I'm Tony Amador, appointed by the 4th District Supervisor.
David Cushman from Antigua, District 3.
Pam Sloan from Stockton, District 2.
This is all staff. Is that it for?
Me? Yeah. Oh. Oh, then you get to sit up there. Oh, you can't sit with us. Why? Because you're better. Oh. You're older.
There's a microphone of your own if you want. I'm not objecting.
Grab that microphone and push the button so they can hear you.
Boy, make yourself at home here, huh?
Yeah, we want to hear you talk.
Right, newcomer.
That's right.
Push the button.
There you go.
That's a welcoming. Patricia Barrett, District 1, Miguel Villapadua.
Nice to meet you.
Okay.
And those are all the members and alternates present. And a quorum is established. Next order of business is, actually, I'm going to say a few words and then I'm going to be quiet for the rest of the evening. It doesn't make much sense to tell you what to think so that you can tell me what I think you think. So I'm going to tell you a little bit why we formed the commission, and then you're going to appoint a chairman, and then we'll go through the agenda. I think one of the biggest roles we can accomplish here is we want to make sure that in the county of San Joaquin, thank you for joining us, Ms. Hadley.
Thanks.
Can you please introduce yourself?
I'm Carol Hadley, Supervisor District Number 2.
Thank you. Perception is reality. I want to make sure that in this county we are held to a light that there are no questions, that we've done everything we can to make sure that everything that is under the county's rules, that we are doing our job. We could stand here and yell and scream all day long about what we agree and disagree with. It's a state mandate. I don't wear that hat, and that is not going to be open for discussion or debate in this room. So anything that has been mandated by the state is really off our list. What we want to make sure is from the county level, are we doing everything we can to make sure that the voters of San Joaquin County have faith in our election process, that they're able to participate in our election process, and that we're in full support of doing that. One of the first orders of business is I'd ask for the register of voters to produce a list of all those questions, from algorithms to computers to polling places to citizenship to DMV. What is state mandated and what is not? And those things that are not state mandated is what we're going to deal with here at this commission. And then hopefully after this process, we have a minimum of 2 meetings before the primary. And if the commission feels we need another one, we could do that as well, to advise the Board of Supervisors, so we can be a standing example to the state of California, and we don't wind up as Dade County, Florida, or something else in this election process as well. That's really all I have to say. I want to thank you for attending this meeting. I always tell everybody, this is gonna be your homework assignment. For those of you who haven't met me and had to listen to my long and boring speeches, which I won't give you tonight, but when you get home, look up Australian ballot. Australian ballot is what our election system is based off of. It's quite an interesting story. And I'll leave it at that, otherwise my opinion will become evidently clear. First order of business is select a chairman, and I select the chairman. The chairman is gonna be, for this year, is gonna be Tony Amador. Tony Amador has got a long law enforcement background, as long as public service background. He understands, we've talked about this as chairman of this committee. His job is not to tell us all what he thinks and dominate the discussion, but rather Robert's Rules of Order and making sure we're sticking to the agenda, and that we're being polite, courteous, and that there's decorum in this room, and so that we can let the great voices of San Joaquin prevail. And with that, Mr. Amador, it's all yours.
Yes, I think for everybody here, I think it's incumbent that you know that under Robert's Rules of Orders, I do not vote. I only make or break ties. What I prefer to do is make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak, so that someone doesn't speak about 10 times and someone else may not speak. So we encourage good dialogue. I understand that we may have a scribe for these minutes, or someone's going to be taking minutes for us for these meetings. All right, then I hate to appoint. It's a tough job. You have to be accurate, but is there any volunteers on the committee that would like to be our secretary or scribe? Well, look at all those hands go up.
How long is that, how long is that position?
Push the green button.
Oh, I'm gonna tell you, we got mouse. How long is that position for?
Well,
Can I
if we
try
don't
it
wear
one
you
day?
out the whole term of when we're meeting. So it'll be into next
Somebody
year.
gives me a pen, I'll take notes.
You will? Would you, for the record?
Thanks.
For the record, again, your name is?
Patricia Barrett.
All right, Patricia, thank you.
You can give me the paper too?
You'll need a pencil and paper to start with. All right, with that, we have an agenda, proposed agenda here. And what we do at all meetings is we'll make sure that there might be something you want to add to the agenda. If not, we'll accept this agenda as is. But this is the opportunity to accept the agenda that's been presented to us. Is there anybody that'd like to make any additions to this agenda? All right, until we get our feet wet, we'll leave it at that, and maybe later on you'll think of some things. All right, we have our, did we do our roll call and introductions? We all did that, okay. We'll use this agenda. I am the chair and EAC secretary. And the terms are laid out already. We know the terms for our committee members. Does everybody understand their terms? Any questions about it? All right. Would you press your button so we can hear you?
The way the terms have been described to me as they need to be, somebody needs to have a 2-year term and a 4-year term. So that way committee members roll off at different times and not everyone rolls off at the same time.
Oh,
So if some, like half of the group, maybe the primary members want to take the 2-year and the alternates or vice versa. It's just a simple technicality to take care of.
all right, is there any suggestions from the
So like
body?
every 2 years, the terms.
Every 2 years, so you would,
Through the chair, if I may,
sure.
I believe the total term of committee members is a 2-year term, although it may be renewed.
That's my reading of it, unless someone else has a different reading of it. So we all have the same term until that time. All right, does everybody have scheduled August 2023 meeting? Is there any suggestions? I think there was a suggestion for a date at one time. Does anybody have a time that they'd like to suggest for August? I know you all have your calendars right in front of you.
I have some suggested dates that I could throw out there that might work.
That would help a lot. And-
Okay.
And I think the time is great because of the parking and everything. If this
Okay.
room is available, this is very convenient for everybody, I think.
Okay, and it would be contingent upon that anyways. We'd have to see
Okay.
if rooms available.
All right, with that, thank you, appreciate it.
So August 3rd,
Which is a Thursday?
yeah, there's 5 dates here and I'll give them out and then everyone can look at their calendars really quickly. August 3rd, August 9th, August 10th, August 14th, August 15th.
I'm gonna beg for the 10th, other than the 3rd, I have a conflict in a scheduling of another meeting. If there's no objection or someone has any strong objections against the 10th,
I like the 10th.
10th is good.
is 10th good with everybody?
10th is good.
All right. The 10th it is, 6 o'clock at this location. All right, I know you haven't had a chance to read the information that's been presented to you. There's some consent items. If you want to discuss them, we can do them now. There's action requested. This is a item from the Registrar of Voters. And if you would, can you help us, tell us what these are and maybe give us a synopsis of these things?
Absolutely.
And I appreciate your help. Thank you.
Oh, of course. So the first item that was presented in your packet is a fact sheet. And for the public, these items are available on our website. So if you wish to have copies of any of this on the home page, you can go to the Election Advisory tab for June 1st, and you can receive copies of all of this information. So the first item is a fact sheet that was created in collaboration with our office and working with the Board of Supervisors. So you have that available to you. The next item available is an abbreviated election calendar. This is our public-facing calendar to alert the public of upcoming deadlines and dates associated with the primary election for March. Additionally, there is a measure calendar. This measure calendar gives the legal deadlines, but we have some recommended dates on this measure calendar for our office internally to be able to get translations and things off to our print vendors. We do recommend that the public utilize the recommended dates. However, there are code-driven deadlines, and those are the dates reflected on the opposite side there. The next item would be our redacted voter roll analysis. So,
Is that under 1DE or is it number 3 rather?
it's 1C.
C,
Yes.
2C, redacted, okay.
Alrighty, so this is giving a summary of talking points on the front. So what occurred, I want to say it was in 2022, the Sheriff's Office received a report from a concerned citizen about the voter rolls from 2020. They provided that data to our office and we analyzed that data and did lots of research on that. So in this packet, you will find reports showing all the updates we've done over the last 5 months from our election management system and from the state database VoteCal. So that's what the first 10 pages are. After that would be our analysis that we provided to the Sheriff's Office. And then at the very back, there is a table. Basically, it's a flow chart to explain to you all the different mailings that go out to obtain information to keep our voter rolls up to date.
That was E?
That was C.
We're down to D then. I'd like to suggest to the members that, because you're getting all of it at one time, maybe you can review it, take it home and study it, and it's not something that we have to, as a consent item, just take if we haven't even reviewed it. So I think we can table these things with a tentative support of them until you get a chance to review the items in more detail in case you want to discuss them at our next meeting, or even if we could ask the Registrar of Voters to help us if there's some explanations that's needed. Would everybody like to attack this now, or would you rather wait?
I'd like to look at it.
Okay, so Is that the sense of?
Chair, I second that too. I'd rather table it for a later time.
All right, I think we can, unless there's objections, I would entertain a motion that we accept the consent items with the caveat that we can come back to it and reopen it. But I think to get this agenda moving, these consent items should probably be approved, but with that caveat that we come back to it if we want to.
Make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second.
Aye.
Okay, what we'll do is we won't yell. We'll raise our hands like elementary school. Your motion was to accept it? Do we have a second?
Aye.
All right.
Until I learn their names, can they say their names?
Sure, would you give her your name?
John Beckman.
David Cushman.
And if you're acting as our
Pam
recording.
Sloan.
We
Pam
only
Sloan.
needed a second, a first and a second. That's all we needed was those two names for the second, the first and second, we won't,
okay.
prior to calling for the vote, I want to go slower for you so you can take minutes. So just raise your hand and tell me to slow down a little bit, okay? All right, I appreciate you volunteering. All right, is there any discussion on well, we should actually call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any objections? Any abstentions? Not, the motion carries. Thank you. I think we're going to be at a,
Through the chair, I just wanted to share, I've attached my card here, so if any of the members do have questions and they'd like to reach out to me to go over any of these documents, I'm more than happy to facilitate those conversations if need be.
it's in each person's packet.
Yeah.
Around the flap, so. Now, as far as the discussion items, the first thing is, we have the same challenge. We haven't read the material in the packet yet. Receive a presentation from the Registrar of Voters regarding the California Voters' Choice Act and discuss the ROV's recommendation to the Board of Supervisors that San Joaquin County adopt the VCA for the future elections. Discussion only, no action to be taken by the EAC. Okay, that makes it easier. So would you go ahead and give us your presentation on that?
Oh, okay, I'll change over here. Alrighty, so I just wanted to share, I actually brought two guests today. I have Assistant Registrar of Voters, John Gardner from Solano County. He is a strong advocate of the polling place model, and so he is available to answer questions about precinct locations and doing the traditional model that we currently do in our county. Then we have Donna Linder. She is the Registrar of Voters, County Clerk Recorder from Stanislaus County, and they are a VCA county that has recently transitioned. So she has great information about what that looks like for a county transitioning over. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into this. This presentation actually has all three discussion items, so I'll pause as soon as we're done with the VCA portion. All right, Voters' Choice Act. The Voters' Choice Act background, the Senate Bill 450 passed in 2016. It's a new model for conducting elections. A majority of California voters are now voting under this model. As of the 2022 election cycle, 27 counties have implemented the VCA model, but to be clear, it's not a required thing in California. So these counties have chosen to go forward with the state recommendation for VCA. So this is just a map to show you our area here in San Joaquin County. We're the red county, and as you can see, we have Solano County up there to the northwest, and we have Contra Costa County straight out, and those two counties are not VCA, but as you can see, most valley counties have switched over and are now VCA counties. All right. So polling places versus vote centers. So to share, the electronic voting system is available both at polling places and vote centers. Dropping off a ballot at any location is available at both locations, or both models. And then accessible ballot marking device is the ADA component that we're required by law to provide for ADA voters, so that's available. Ballot printing on demand is not available at a polling place. we are looking into how we can go about that. Something that Solano County does is they have the ability to use their touch writers to print those other ballots for other precincts, so the voter coming in that is at the wrong location can actually get the proper ballot. It would still be a provisional, but they would not have to have their ballot duplicated, which would save procedures on our end, and that's the true ballot of the voter. Increased training, so with the vote center model, you have smaller classes and more days, so there's opportunity to train the workers before the big day on election day. It tends to be quieter those days leading up to election day at the vote centers, and so they do get some on-the-job training, but also the training prior to the start of their time working at the vote center. Polling places, we do our online training. We do offer labs that are robust, so after they've done the online training, poll workers have the opportunity to go ahead and come out to our lab that we host out at the agricultural center in the training room there, and so there's several days they can come out and play with the equipment, ask questions of county staff, and all of those opportunities. So that's how training is done currently. Voting at any location. So in the vote center model, if you live in Tracy but work in Lodi, you can go to the vote center in Lodi and vote without a provisional envelope. You just vote normal, just like you would if you were at your home polling precinct in Tracy. So that's what that looks like and what makes it different for VCA. Multi-day voting, so we do offer early voting here at our office 29 days before election day. Once the vote by mail ballots have been mailed, you can come to our office to participate in early voting, but you're not able to do that anywhere else in the county until election day, and then that's the day polling locations are open. So it's a one-day voting at polling locations, or you can come to our office to receive services prior to the election if you choose. There is additional outreach with vote centers. So what does happen is we are required to send out mailings when we make a transition over to VCA. So there's an opportunity to send more items out to the public to inform them of our transition to VCA. With that being said, we've also had our board adopt another position for our county, and we added a vote by mail and outreach supervisor. So I have a unit that does outreach. In this last year, they have implemented the Facebook page, Instagram, and Twitter. They're at a lot of community events. I don't know if any of you have had an opportunity. They've been at the Linden Cherry Festival. They were at the Asparagus Festival. They'll be at the fair this weekend. They're doing a lot of outreach events where they're out there with voter registration information and education pieces. They're offering applications to be an election officer, or if you're interested in being a voting location. With the locations, right now we had 127 locations in the 2022 primary. We influxed to about 178 locations, so on average we're looking at between 175 to 200 locations for polling locations, whereas vote centers would be 40 locations. 8 of those locations would be open 11 days before the election, and then the full 40 would be open 4 days before the election. Right now, we would be staffing with 1,200 to 1,400 poll workers, whereas we would have about 400 workers for the vote center model. However, it's 11 days, and not everyone may be able to do that. So when I say 400, that's assuming that they would work the 11 days, which may not be the case. So we may see split shifts where people maybe can work 4 days, and then another person would replace them for 4 days. So staffing the VCA model would look very different than how we staff currently. So community involvement, increased public outreach and communication. The election administration plan would be required of our county, and that would be submitted to the Secretary of State. We would have to participate. We currently do have a voting accessibility advisory committee and a language accessibility advisory committee. We've put them on notice that we are in the process of making a decision here in San Joaquin County. So we have postponed meetings for the moment, but those committees do exist for us. And then, of course, all of you being here as the Election Advisory Committee, I think that you're going to be a critical component with whatever we decide to do. If we stay polling place or we go vote center, each of you are here to be advocates for our community. So I think that you're going to be an awesome resource for whatever we choose to do going forward. All right, so VCA components. All vote by mail ballots was implemented in 2020 and now is required by Election Code 3005.5, sorry. Ballot drop boxes have been implemented since 2020 with the amount that we have, and now they are required by Elections Code 3025.5. Vote centers were used in this county in 2020, and they were authorized by SB 450. And as we all know, in the moment of COVID, the VCA model was how we were able to move forward with an election. So that's also why you've seen vote by mail become a permanent, or become a thing where everyone was getting mailed a vote by mail ballot. And then since then, legislation has been established to make it a permanent thing for California. All right. So statistics from the November 2020 Vote Center model. Here, let's see, what is it? So when we implemented this just for the 2020 general election, we had 21% in-person voting versus what we've had for the 2022 cycle. And yes, this was a presidential general election, and so the turnout tends to always be higher in a presidential general election. However, we've seen 1.75% of voters show up in the primary of 2022, and about 4% of voters show up in person in the general election for 2022. 48% were using mail ballot. I'm sure that number is upwards of like 90-something% these days. And then ballot drop boxes, about 31% of voters were utilizing those. We had about 48,000 vote by mail ballots returned in those drop boxes in this last election that we just had. So to give some insight on the drop boxes. And the 2020 general election was the highest turnout in San Joaquin County at a historical amount of 80%. Positive feedback from voters, staff, and poll workers was given to our office. We've seen a lot of positivity around that model at that time, so just to share that with you. So in-person voter participation in the 2020 general election under the VCA model. So San Joaquin is not a VCA model, but as you see, we're at 4%, and then I've highlighted the counties. Of course, Los Angeles County, 20%. We have Stanislaus County here, they're at 8%. We do not have Solano County on here because they are not a vote center county. So this is just to give a comparison for you of what that looks like. All right. So Voters Choice Act projected costs. We do want to dive into this more, but I wanted to make sure you got the presentation that was given to our board. So basically, poll worker and the stipends and facilities costs, we're looking at about $314,000 where the VCA model. If we're able to utilize facilities at the price point of $100 a day like we pay for polling locations, we would look at a savings there of $49,000. Community outreach right now, we spend about $200,000. We'd be upwards of about $640,000. So one-time costs are estimated at that $440,000 during the VCA transition. So Voters Choice Act, why change? Increased accuracy enhances fraud protection and security. We are able to manage 40 locations versus almost 200 locations. Increased efficiencies, voters can vote at any vote center.
Excuse me, what does that mean, 40 instead of 200?
There would be 40 vote center locations versus almost 200 polling locations.
Okay.
So we'd be managing 40 vote centers versus 200 polling locations for the one day. Increased efficiencies, voters can vote at any vote center. There's disaster resiliency because there's 40 locations. If we have a power outage or something like that, we can get the resources there quickly. We still plan for that even with polling locations. If a vote center goes down, because you can vote at any vote center, you're able to go to the next closest one to vote if there is a power outage, whereas with a polling location, you can only be serviced at your polling location that you're assigned to, or you would have to vote provisional. So this is, but you would still be able to, if you wanted to go to the next polling place and vote provisional, you would still have that option. And then it reduces voter challenges because it's not, oh, you're in the wrong location, or you need to go across town to this location, or whatever it may be. We experienced a big change in this last 2022 general election because we just went through redistricting. And so the lines shifted drastically in our county. So a lot of folks that said, oh, well, this isn't my polling place. Well, there was such a shift. We went from 3 assembly districts to 2, like from the state level all the way down. There was quite a shift in our districts. And so that's why people were moved to different locations. All right. Improved accessibility, more bilingual access. Something that we do struggle with in this county is the requirement to have bilingual poll workers. And so we do our absolute best to staff our locations with the correct number of poll workers that speak the language. With 40 vote centers, that would be more manageable to ensure that we have the language accessibility available. There'd be more ideal ADA accessibility. We could choose locations that are very easy to get to. We know that traditional polling places like garages and things have been used, but what happens is there's ADA compliance, and most driveways are not in compliance with that requirement. So we struggle with the ability to use homes for access because of that. But it would give us opportunities to use bigger facilities that would have that access available. The voter has a choice, and it's more convenient for them if they so choose to vote at a different location, they can. Increased participation, and this is based off of the information that we've gathered, that we are seeing more voter outreach and communications, and it seems like there's more public input with the public administration plan. That document would be presented, and we'd have town halls to get input from the public in regards to our election administration plan.
Could I back up a minute? I don't mean to.
No, you're fine.
I know. When you say voters have a choice, they've gone from 200 locations to 40 locations. What do you mean by they have a choice?
So for the 200 locations, if you're assigned to a precinct in Woodbridge, that is your precinct. You cannot go to another location and vote without it being provisional. If you go to a different location, you're gonna have to vote a provisional ballot that would then have to come back and be verified at our office.
Okay, maybe I didn't ask my question correctly, so forgive me. We're going from 200 locations to 40 locations. So when you use the word choice, my first thought was, now they have a choice, but it looks like to me they have less choices of locations.
They would have less choices in the instance of locations available if they're okay voting provisional. In this county, we've seen a lot of turmoil around voting provisional, so this would give access at the 40 locations where any voter can go to any location and get the correct ballot and not vote provisional. So I guess that's more the difference. So if they're okay voting provisional, they do have 200 options, but if they're not okay with that, they technically only have the one option. Whereas with the 40 locations, they could go any of those 40 and not have to vote a provisional ballot. Does that clarify?
Mr. Chairman?
Sure, through the chair.
Ms. Hale, the increased accuracy, enhanced fraud protection and security, could you elaborate on that?
So we would be able to manage those locations by putting at least one county staff member. So we would still do volunteers, and the majority of the workforce would be that, but we'd be able to put county staff at those 40 locations that could ensure processes are in place. We do experience with poll workers, it's like we prepare the election, we hand it over to the public for a day, and then they hand it back to us. And sometimes there's shortfalls. We've had locations where they just have everybody vote a provisional ballot because they're unsure, so that's just easier for them. We've had instances where the touch writer doesn't get set up, and so there is no ADA access. We've had instances where the language materials don't get set out, and so there'd be an opportunity to ensure that there's the two-person integrity happening with everything, and that there's county staff present that are background checked that could assist the poll workers as a team for the security piece.
Let me try to help us that are new to all of some of the terms you're using.
Absolutely.
This presentation in detail, is it available to all of us?
Absolutely. We're going to post it on the website, and it's being live streamed right now as well.
Good, because I think they'll be better able to digest it that way than just quickly get all of this information.
Agreed.
Doesn't give us a chance to really digest and ask questions. So I'm glad, I guess you can reiterate, this is just not a vote. It's just a discussion that we're doing this item.
Yes, that's
Okay,
correct.
thank you. Yes, questions?
Sorry about that. I was holding it down. Hi, Christian Santos once again. In the previous slide, you mentioned there was in 2020, there was a 80% higher turnout using the current model, the VCA model, correct, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay. So let's fast forward to now, 2023, the spread. Since then, we had two elections that I know of, right? The most recent one was the midterms, right? And then prior to that, the special election for the recall, okay? Those two things happened. And I reckon that they were all, like here in San Joaquin County, it was still used under that same model, the VCA model, for those two elections as well, correct?
No, it was not. We converted back to polling place model coming out of the COVID requirement.
Okay.
Because we hadn't adopted it, our board had not adopted BCA, and so it just made sense to convert back to.
So for my record, the last two elections, for example, the midterms, and then prior to that, the recall was not, the VCA model was not
Was not
utilized in those two.
Correct.
It was using prior to the VCA.
Yep, just the 2020 general election was the only election San Joaquin used the vote center model.
Okay, so going forward, it's only just gonna be just for the generals, not the other, like the state runoff or anything like that? Like it's only just gonna be for the general elections going forward, or like the big one, every 4 years? Or is it gonna be for all of them?
It will be, well, it would be for all of the elections if we voted in, but right now it's for none of the elections, even the big ones. We only did it in 2020 because of COVID. Our board would have to make that decision. And so back when we had the board meeting on February 28th, one of the asks for the Election Advisory Committee was to take in this information, and I know you all need to review it, and I'm here to answer questions tonight and going forward to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors on the topic.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that. The only reason I asked specifically about with the voter turnout, because I follow the news myself.
Yes.
I do agree with the 2020, with the 80% one, because since then, again, I had not known that it was you guys were using, that the last two were under the VCA model. You clarified that. It was not.
It was not.
Okay, all right, because the voter turnout on both were really low.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Why did the number 40 and not 80 or 100? We're a big county.
So it's mandated by code. If you do decide to go Voters' Choice Act, it states that you need, for every 50,000 voters, you need one location open for the 11 days. For every 30,000 voters or 10,000 voters, when you get down to, no, 30,000, you have to do more locations. So the 4 days leading up to it, you need to provide that to them.
So we're not using voter choice model yet. We're still using the polling place model. And yet every voter is still mailed a ballot regardless. They get it in the mail a month before election day. If they want to return that, my question is, they still would have a choice, correct? Because they can still return their ballot in any mailbox and in any drop box?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so in other words, even though we're still using the polling place model, they still, in a way, do have choice. They can still return their ballot in that method anywhere. Is
Yep.
that right? Okay, thank you.
Anybody else for second time? Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, so increased participation, we went over that already. All right, so potential negative impacts, there is a one-time cost increase, and change is tough, and I know that's not just the empty list. That's what I have, as to knowing that change is difficult. Our office has vetted this process and looked into what other counties are doing, and so this list may have concerns that I think the committee could bring forward. If there are other negative impacts we want to discuss, we can definitely visit that at the next meeting, or however the board chooses to move forward on that.
Can you give us a quick comparative analysis of the increased costs?
The increased costs, back to my slide, we're looking at about $440,000 for the increase in the amount of outreach we have to do, so about $500,000 in outreach. And because our county has not implemented this long-term, we don't know what staffing looks like and what those difficulties could be in relation to that. Donna might have something on that. I don't know. Do you want to share anything on that?
Our staffing, once we moved to VCA, is a lot less than it was with polling locations. Our model is that we hire part-time extra help, we call them seasonal. That way they go through the background check, and they are who actually checks in voters, prints the ballots, things like that. We still use just a couple volunteers at each location, and they're there just for line management and to help with the touch writers. So it has decreased our actual amount of people that work at each election by over 1,000. We used 265 clerks and volunteers on election day in our last election, and 335 during the early voting, and some of those people are the same people. So, like Olivia explained, some of them working half days, things like that. We keep them at 30 hours. So And we used to hire like 1,200 volunteers when we were at polls.
I have a question over here.
That outreach money, is that gonna be yearly, or is that a one-time thing to where when you transition to the new system, in the event it got voted?
It's a one-time cost, but again, it would be important that our county looks at how can we continue that outreach going forward. The legal requirement is the one-time cost of doing that, but what does it look like going forward? Are we just gonna do it the one time and just assume everyone knows? We've had folks in the room that have shared that they didn't know that we switched back and different things like that. So I think from an administration perspective, we'd wanna look at, yeah, that might say it's one-time cost, but is that what's best for San Joaquin County? Do we need to have some more outreach efforts? So we could see an increase, going forward for at least a few elections, I could imagine.
I have a question over here.
You talk about the one-time cost for the outreach and what have you. Do you have a plan in place for that outreach? Do you know how you're going to approach that?
It's a mailing that's required by the state, so they give guidelines on those 2 mailings that have to be sent.
Okay, so it's just the mailing.
It's just the
Only.
mailings, just the mailings. With that said, though, we've added last year an outreach team to ROV, and so they are actually there's going to be billboards. We've done this in the past, but we're going to be more robust in what our outreach looks like now. So whatever model we go with, we're already increasing drastically what our outreach looks like. So, all right.
Any other question before she proceeds? Yes.
I just don't see the mailing is reaching, so I live on the south side, and we have a lot of underserved voters, and bilingual English is not their first language, so I don't see where mailing is gonna be efficient to where it's gonna reach our voters. I'm thinking more, boots on the ground, interacting with our neighborhood. They do it with the census, why can't we do it for voting?
And that would be wonderful if we get the volunteers, and I do think that we're attempting to do that just by getting out to every community event that we can, from Linden to Tracy to Mountain House to South Stockton, wherever we can get to spread that information. Like once we make a decision, if we go VCA, one of the components that my outreach team will be working on is making sure that they're sharing that and having those conversations with the community and town halls and things of that nature. So I 1,000% agree with you, growing up in Stockton myself, that we can't just send everybody a postcard and think that's gonna do the job. There's definitely gonna be a need to be more robust than just what the state is requiring us to do.
I have a question.
You go first and then him afterwards.
Has there been any analysis, study, or input from law enforcement or security fraud detection personnel who could opine as to which of the 2 methods provide a more robust prevention against fraud?
We could definitely reach out to our sheriff. I do have access to the other counties that have done this, and they may have some statistical data on that. I would say what is helpful is if you are at a polling place, we don't always know in real time if somebody has turned in a ballot, whereas with Vote Center, in our county, we're fortunate because we have the poll pad in the gateway to where it tells us in real time if a voter has voted. So if they voted a polling place, and they drive down the street to the next polling place, that poll pad's gonna say that voter already has cast an in-person ballot somewhere. So we have that security in place. But as far as what does that look like in having a law enforcement, I'm not aware of a study out there for that, but I can look into that for you.
Well, our district attorney probably has firsthand knowledge of the most recent city council member in Lodi who had all of those fraudulent ballots that he cast. The DA's opinion on which of these would prevent something like that, for instance, might be helpful.
Right, and something to remember about that is the ballots were not fraudulent. They were legitimately issued to voters. The problem was this individual had collected the ballots. You're actually allowed to ballot harvest. That's allowed, but the issue is it sounds like, and of course this is under investigation, so I can only speak from what we know publicly right now, and that's that it sounds like the individual had the voter, actually he voted their ballot and then had them sign the envelope. So that was more of they were registering people online with their information. So it's a little bit different like how that played out, but I think that we can absolutely reach out and see if the DA would like to share something with the committee on that.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I can do that. I can reach out.
All right, and you had a question.
So basically the 440 grand outreach is a one-time ordeal, one-time like lump sum? Okay,
Correct.
right? Is that my understanding?
Yep.
Okay. What I'm hearing basically is advertising and marketing, because that's part of all outreach, right?
Correct.
How you gonna convey it? In person, mass mailing, mail, paper, electronic, email, internet, right? Okay. I kind of, well, basically, I would like to emphasize maybe on the whoever, when we cross that bridge with the 440,000, I think to ease off the tensions here, people want to know the allocation, how to allocate the money, and to where and to how. So when Patricia brought up about having boots on the ground, that's people.
Correct,
People deployed somewhere, a person, an individual, right?
correct.
Not a computer, not a kiosk, an individual. And if you also took into consideration what she was saying, look at the county. I look at demographics, okay? She just got done telling you that basically there's a language barrier. And so you send boots on the ground with a person that can't speak Spanish or is not fluent in Spanish, that's a big disservice to who they're trying to, the niche market, okay? All right, the target market. So that's just a word to the wise, okay? Now, we fast forward to today, because the way when I hear mass mailing, that's so 80s and 90s, okay? That's not us right now. I'm not saying obliterate it and omit it. It's still helpful. But when it comes to the allocation, whoever's gonna decide that, maybe, I'll throw some figures. In context with today, with right now, 80% social media, that's internet, right? Okay? Or 50-50 internet, social media, and then and then the other 50% of that money, boots on the ground. Or do like a 60-30, 40, you know what I mean? And maybe 10% to just the mailing, something to that. I think people are more apprehensive about how the money is allocated.
So it's required, so that 440,000 just requires those are the two required state mailings that the Secretary of State requires us to mail out.
Right.
But in addition to that, we would utilize our outreach team and our full staff to facilitate those boots on the ground and bringing in temporary staff. And so I think after that first election, we have to do the 440,000 in mailings. But from there, we may have the option to maybe do one mailing and then utilize some of that funds that we're going to set aside to do a boots on the ground program. So the first election, the first time we do this, we have to spend that 440,000 on those two required mailings per the state requirement.
Okay.
But then from there, I think we definitely have some flexibility to talk about ways that we can engage our unique community to get that word out.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead, Donna.
Not to interrupt you all, but one of the requirements of your election administration plan is to have, like Olivia has said, town hall meetings, but they have to be in all of your required languages.
Yep.
So you'll have your meetings in your languages to reach that part of your public. And what we did in Stanislaus County is we went to those areas and had a translator. So you do reach that public.
And to share too, I have 3 permanent staff that are fluent Spanish speakers available that read, write, speak it, and are allocated bilingual speakers for the county. So I do have staff members that can provide that support as well.
Any other questions? Yes.
Also, in those languages, you have a lot of Southeast Asians that have never been representative in this, because I've worked with for the past 20 years, and they have not a clue and don't ever get anything in their language, and that's a big disservice to them because they fought to come to this country.
So we do provide facsimile ballots. The law only requires the facsimile ballot. So if someone with a language barrier, so we have 10 languages on file with our county. So we've actually, in the last 2 elections, our outreach vote by mail team is actually, they do vote by mail when it's close to election time outside of outreach, and they are sending those facsimile ballots to anyone that's identified that they speak a different language. We're actually sending them a facsimile, which is a copy of their ballot in the language that they prefer. But there's always more that could be done, and I think in reaching out to our community advocates that are out there in all of those communities and working directly with those local community members and those organizations is somewhere where we can always improve, and that'll be a forever thing, and we will continue to dive into doing more of that outreach.
I just want to ask her one quick question. What is your timeline for recommendation to the Board of Supervisors? Because I'm contemplating maybe after each of us review that in person, we can have a lot of questions here today. So I'm trying to expedite it. give us a chance to really review it and see what your timeframes are, what you're pressed against, because I think we collectively might want to discuss and make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors as a committee. So what is your timeframes?
So per the meeting in February, the recommendation was to be returned to the board within 6 months, which would put us at the end of August, the second meeting in August. However, if at that time the committee is not prepared to relinquish a report, we could go to the board and ask for a little more time. Keep in mind, it's important for a decision to be made at least 18 months out from the election in which we're going to implement. So as I shared in that February 28th meeting, if we weren't making a decision in a timely manner, we would not be able to implement it for 2024. So at this time, we're looking for a recommendation following the order from the full board of getting back in front of the board by August 28th. But if there's some time to review, we do have a little window because this isn't something we could implement until 2026 at this time anyway.
What I would propose to the committee is, if you have additional questions,
That's our
after you review it, send them to the ROV, and then she'll CC all of us so that we will have knowledge of it. And then if it's a compelling thing that we don't like or something, we can always call a meeting and get together and talk about it in detail. Would that speed the process if y'all have an opportunity to look at it? I just have one overriding question of you, and I don't know how much, is this your presentation was done, it's time for questions, is there?
For the VCA part, yes.
Okay.
I just switched the slide because I figured we're already here. So.
Right, why change?
We have seen half of the state change over, and for me, I don't honestly have a preference other than the fact that I see counties of our size being able to utilize the vote center model to create better efficiencies. And so for me, I want to do what's best for San Joaquin County, and from the work that myself and my team have done, we've analyzed this and we've determined that we think that this would be a good move for San Joaquin County.
Okay, any other pressing questions, and we'll move on to the next item.
Question. To the chair's point, he asked you directly why change, and I believe your answer was, based on the data you collected, half of the state, I guess, embarked on it or changed.
Yep.
So which portion of the state so happened to lead the way? Was it SoCal or was it NorCal?
It was actually the valley. If you, the slide a little bit ago that I showed, most of the counties surrounding us outside of Solano and Contra Costa are all VCA counties. Calaveras, Stanislaus, Merced, like all of, if you look at the valley map, all of those counties are VCA.
Thank you.
Did you have another question?
I don't have a question. I just want to make a suggestion that if we were to move forward with the VCA, that maybe an ad hoc committee be formed for the outreach and see how we can move forward on bettering that kind of a communication with our communities.
You've outlined how you would do outreach already, and you mentioned the number. I'm sure Hmong is one of the languages that I know Carol had a concern about. But so she has an outreach, and she can probably give us a copy of it or how she would propose doing outreach, and if that would help you. And it certainly will be way before we meet again.
I have a question. Just to be on topic with regards to the ad hoc and bridging the gap with the constituents that have a language barrier. So if we rewind a little bit, I heard that you said that per your data, per the county, there are 10 languages specifically that pretty much stand out that actually need translation. I'll make it easier. Obviously, we know one is Spanish, one is definitely Hmong. Per your data, what are the others that you guys know of? So that way, we know that the county is in sync and succinct with the constituents.
So I'm going to try to remember all of them really quick. Dee Dee, do you have a list with you?
We're all recording, aren't we?
So let's see. We have Hmong Chinese, Ilocano, Khmer, Urdu, Punjabi, Vietnamese,
Tagalog?
English and Spanish, but there's one more.
There's no Laotian.
That's the
Laotian, yep, Laotian is one.
Thank you.
Yep. I think that's all of them. Did I get them all? That's all. Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
This concludes your portion of the discussion on this item
For the
number one.
VCA. I didn't know
Okay.
if you wanted to hear from our guests or not. We have, two different folks, so. if
Is
you
there any
wanna-
objection, folks, you want to hear from our guests, the troublemakers from Stanislaus that started all of this? Yes? If you will, thank you.
Stanislaus County moved officially in 2022, but we, because of some changes in our equipment, and we have the same equipment that San Joaquin has, we really switched right after 2020. We couldn't go back. We have found, and you were asking why switch? We have found people come in, especially on the weekends, and they're very grateful that there's a place they can vote. They travel for work, they can't get there on Tuesday, and so they have that opportunity to vote on the weekend. Our 10-day sites, or 11 days with Election Day, we have 6 of those, and we use those for training. New people that are going to be in charge go out, they learn all kinds of things. It tends to be where the most unusual things happen, is during those 10 days. I don't know why, but it works great for training. And so then we just feel like it is a better service. As Olivia mentioned, you can go any place in the county instead of being assigned a polling location. We print our ballots on demand right there at the vote centers. And so if you live in a different town than you work, it makes it more convenient for you. You always have that option to go on Election Day. And so we just have found that it's a better service for our voters. We did not have poll books. We had paper rosters still. So our data, we used to have 18,000 or more provisional ballots. So we also, instead of finishing an election in, almost the 30-day time frame, we're done in 2 weeks. So that's also good for our candidates, our voters. You know how the election is, especially your locals, turns out in Stanislaus County a lot faster than historically, so.
Any questions of her?
And this, for the three of you, and this is probably an uninformed question, but since everybody receives a ballot in the mail and everybody can put that ballot in the mail for free to vote, why do we need polling places at all?
Well, it's required. And you, you have a lot of voters that want to vote in person. So that's the nice thing about the Voters' Choice Act. It does give them more options. Like you mentioned, you can put it in the mail, you can put it in a drop box, you can take it to a poll, or as in our county, a vote center. But they can go anywhere to vote. And one thing I tell our voters, when you think of a vote center, think of it as like 3 of your polling places put together. So it's just like a giant polling location.
But we're required to have a place for them to vote.
You are required to have a place for in-person voting.
Yes, you had a question?
Yes, so you said 2022 was the first official election that you had voter VCA enforced for your county, and then so in 2018 you did not, correct?
No, 2018, we did not. In
Okay.
2019, we had a small election. We implemented, we called them satellite offices. We did 3 of them, just so our public could kind of see what Voters' Choice Act might be like. We put them in our our busiest locations, and they were a great opportunity for people to see, oh, you're at the wrong polling location, go over to that spot, they can get your ballot for you. So we did that kind of as a, how would this work for our county? And then in 2020, because of COVID, I mean, we were required to do it. And so we just kept going. The primary did have a law that allowed us to do it without being official. And so then we got our EPA and then we're official in 2022.
Okay. By chance, do you have, or would you be able to provide the comparison between turnout in 2018, which was the last time you did not have VCA, and 2022, which is 2 midterms, one with VCA and one without VCA?
I'd have to look it up.
Just to see if any difference in effectiveness or if it made an impact, just out of curiosity.
While you're looking that up, does anybody else have a question? I have one burning question. Burning. It's burning me. You said they print ballots on demand. What's needed is proof of who the ballot person who's asking for a ballot. What do you use? Do you use any ID at all? Do they have to present a photo ID, for instance?
California cannot require photo identification.
So if I go in, I just ask for a ballot, you have to give it to me?
No, when you go into a voting location, one of our vote centers, you fill out a form where you're going to give your name, address, date of birth, things like that. And they're going to look you up in the system. You sign the form. They look you up in the system. They make sure you have not already voted. We use laptops because we don't have poll books. So we're looking you up in our voter registration file, making sure that you have not already voted. And then it tells us what ballot type that you should receive.
So if I have his information, I give you his name, his address, I know all about him, you won't ask for photo ID, you won't verify that I am that person?
We are not allowed to ask you that, but can you sign the way he signs?
Yeah. If I'm a crook, I'm gonna sign whatever name, how many times I can vote. I'm just curious, that's just open. Anybody else have any questions before we move on? She's preparing some, she's getting the answer for your question.
I have a question. The slide that asks Voters' Choice Act, why change with the question marks, and that to the chair's point, why change at all, right? Like, you know, what I noticed, I'm not contesting the graphic or anything, the context of what's on, the information that's on there, but I see more pluses. You know, from a sales perspective, I like to know, like, what are the minuses? Like, someone is being affected, right? Like, the selling points are all right there, right? It's all pro, you know, efficiency, you know, to reduce fraud, okay? That's all good, right? But there was an answer that you gave that said that specifically that, and I kind of jotted it down. The reason why it changed, you said it was because redistricting occurred in that era. Is that correct or not correct? Right, right.
So redistricting happens every 10 years regardless of if we're VCA or not. So we just had the decennial redistricting that occurs every 10 years.
And that so happened to happen in 2020? Is that?
So, yeah, so it would,
Okay.
in the normal circumstances, we would have had that information in mid-2021, but we actually got it in December of 2021.
Okay.
And so it was an expedited process to get it done, which we were able to accomplish. But that happens every 10 years regardless of what model we are. But I do know that polling places are going to be drastically more impacted by redistricting than vote centers would be.
I see.
Well, she's looking up that information for the benefit of the members of the Election Advisory Committee. Sir, did you have a presentation you wanted to make? You probably spent a lot of gas coming up here, and so we appreciate you coming, but.
Not exactly a presentation, but a few thoughts. John Gardner, I'm the Assistant Registrar of Voters for Solano County. We are still a traditional poll place county for a few reasons. Let me just kind of back up a little bit because there's some overarching things and processes that are similar and almost identical that we do that are presented here. We have the exact same equipment. We have the HART voting system. We have electronic poll books. We have connectivity at our polling places. That process is the same. The VCA model that we've watched since about 2013, we went to Colorado and saw how that works and saw what they did. And it's the voters are different there than they are here. And we look at voter behavior, especially in our county. We're a big commuter county. 60% of our voters drive outside of the county to work. It's just the way it is. So we had that thought, well, people might live over here but want to vote over here because it's along their commute or something like that, and this would be beneficial to them. But in Colorado, what we noticed was that a lot of people were already voting early. They had this big contingency of about 40% of their voters would vote in the 2 weeks prior to Election Day. And then we asked ourselves, well, what happens here in California? How many people vote, even though we don't have a lot of locations? How many actually come to our office, our satellite offices, and vote prior to election day. It's not a lot, it's less than 1%. So making the flip, essentially, of taking what would be 200 locations and dropping that down to 40 locations, but open for 10 days, doesn't mean people are gonna show up on any of those other 10 days, right? People's behavior doesn't change easily. We can change our operations easily, though. So we thought, well, what can we change operationally to make this work for people? And the one thing you keep hearing about is, well, people are voting provisionally because they're showing up at the wrong location. Oh, okay, well, we can fix that. Don't change their location. Every election, you vote at the same place, no matter what's on the ballot. No matter how redistricting worked, you just vote at the same place all the time. Let's change our processes to make that happen. And that's what we did. And then we slowly started realizing, hey, there's 2 polling places right across the street from each other. People don't know to go to this one versus this one. Well, let's eliminate one of those. And we'll start knocking down these polling places that are causing confusion and adding to the very costly provisional ballot process. So over time, we just keep reducing the number of polling places to make it more efficient. Now we don't have any more provisional ballots.
Great.
We're in the same bucket as everybody else, where we have 10% or less voters voting in person, but we don't have this big expense, this big outreach to do, this big model that we have to think about. How do I do this over 10 days? We just have to pull it off for 1 day. And we've gone out to the communities and built these really great relationships by talking at their churches or at their civic groups or at their Boy Scouts groups. And by explaining how the process works, we actually convince them to do what's called adopting the poll place. So it's not our staff that's running the operation, it's the groups that live in these neighborhoods and communities. They not only adopt it and work it, but they recruit the poll workers for us too. So instead of having to recruit 1,200 people, which is the number of people we hire, we only recruit about 70. And those 70 people from the community are like the lead poll workers, and they recruit their friends to work at the polling place or people in their community. And that's just fine. They could be all from the Republican Central Committee. Great. They can be all from the League of Women Voters. That's great too. They could be all from the Church of Christ. Love it. It's your location. Use it, adopt it, and it helps us be more efficient, and it helps them be more successful because now it's a team of your friends working at the poll place versus a bunch of strangers that you're just meeting for the first time. So,
Have you had, I don't mean to cut you off here, but
Sure.
have you had churches actually have polling places?
Absolutely.
'Cause that's a great idea. I mean, I'm just,
Yeah, most of our polling locations are churches.
so you'd have Lions Club and Eagles, and you can have all those people that would volunteer.
Yeah, you bet. The Kiwanis adopt for us. Yeah, the Rotary Club, the Masons. Yeah. They're
Anything
groups.
else?
No, I think I would just take some questions. I mean, here's some oohs and ahs, and there's a lot of thoughts. I have some handouts on some of the stuff that we do and how we have presented to our Board of Supervisors and the public about the concept of the Voters' Choice Act. And the big hurdle that we really can't get over is the upfront cost. I know Olivia did a good job and probably ran a bunch of numbers, but we think the first round of costs is a lot more expensive than what people are talking about. We're still waiting to see some budget numbers from the early adopters and what they went through for that. And the trouble that we have is dropping the number of locations so drastically, right? I think Olivia was gonna go from 200 to 40. That's a big drop in locations. The first time you do it, because everybody's gonna come on election day or the day before, and maybe Donna can talk about this, you may not know what places are gonna be the busiest and where people are gonna choose to go. So you have to be able to scale that and staff it up so you don't get long lines like Sacramento went through on their first go at it. Right, you don't want to get overwhelmed at these locations, but it's new, so you're going to spend some more money to make sure you don't get embarrassed and you do things right, and that's a big hurdle to go through. What we pay poll workers is way cheaper than what we pay our seasonal or extra help, right? So that's a big ask as well. To go from what we would have 50 seasonal employees, we would have to jump up to about 250. So we're putting extra burden on the county HR department, paying for all those background checks and screenings, plus the additional time to train them and get them up to speed. And my approach might be different than Donna's because we would want to fully staff those with seasonal employees because they have access to the voter registration system. So that kind of boosts that cost up. So a lot of those things just kind of go through my mind about how do I maintain the community involvement while taking over and staffing it with our people versus their people.
Donna, before you give us your answer, anybody have any questions of him? You have a question?
I just said I like his way best.
Oh. All right, with that, Donna, did you have an answer for him?
I do. I'm elected, so I feel like I'm in a debate. The Voters' Choice Act has not increased our turnout. In 2018, it was 64%. In 2022, it was only 49. It's about a little over that, almost 50%. But a couple things that John said that I wanted to make clear. We staff with partly part-time staff and partly volunteers, and we do Adopt a Vote Center also. So our volunteers could come from your Boy Scout club or your school band group sometimes adopts a vote center. Our college in the area, one of their organizations adopts a vote center. I mean, so we do have that program also. So those are just some of the things that we still do.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no more questions, we'll move to the next item.
I just thought of one more comment because, no, this is a totally separate deal. I ask a lot of why questions. Olivia will tell you that. Why are we doing this? Why do you do that? Why do you do this? And one question that the commission should ask is, we're required to have in-person voting, but how much in-person voting are we have, right? If Olivia is saying it's 4% or 5% of the voters are voting in person, how many poll places are required? Does anybody know? No, I'll give you the formula for it because it's very simple. You take the total number of voters that you have in the county and divide it by 6,000. That's the minimum number of poll places you're required. So it's quite a few less than 200. But that's like the best case scenario. If you are super dense and super urban, like Orange County, you could probably get away with doing that minimum number, but you're not, right? You're spread out. You got some unincorporated areas. It's rural. We're like that too. So we have a lot more than the minimum number, but what's the happy medium, right? If you want to do just what's required, vote centers is very specific about 1 per 10,000 voters, but poll places is as well, right? 1 for every 6,000 voters. And you can put groups of consolidations, those groups of 6,000s, into one location, and we kind of have some charts on that too. But think about that as well. If you're going to stick with poll places, can it be done more efficiently and kind of bring the cost down for that?
Thank you. I guess we're to item number 2, a status update.
All right, so that's the processing of polling locations and all that good stuff, right? I didn't have hold on, is that right? Okay. So we're just gonna talk a little bit about that. So today I did bring with me 500 poll worker or election officer applications. And then I also have 500 cards for locations that might be interested in being a polling location. So I'm going to kind of explain this a little bit and how it works. So we can't actually decide, something John shared with you is permanent voting precincts, so they know every election which locations will exist, which is something we're looking into here in San Joaquin. The way it works right now, because that's what we're working with, is we start looking into improvements through this committee and the different things that we're doing. You can apply to be a polling location. You send in your card to us, then our team will reach out and they have to set up the survey to come out to see if it's a compliant location that we can use. Anyone can volunteer to be a polling location. The determination is going to come from us coming out and doing the survey to determine that we can use that location. We try to do everything we can to use a location, and so we have mitigation opportunities. If it's adding in a little ramp or a lip at the door, or holding a door open with a doorstop, or whatever that may be, there are ways that we can mitigate them. So that's what that team would come out and look at is, okay, this polling place that doesn't meet the minimum requirements. If it doesn't, is there things that we can do to make it ADA compliant? So that process has to occur. So we encourage everyone here in the room to take cards if they wish to tonight. If you want to volunteer to be a polling location, get that information back to our office, and we will get you in our system So once we get to the stage in about 6 months before the election, we'll be sending out interest cards. So every active location we have on file and every election officer that we have that's active on file will receive an interest card to ask them, are they available for those dates of the election? So then once those cards go out and we get them back, they say yes or no, we scan them into the system, and then we get a pool of how many locations have said yes and how many officers have said yes. So then we have that information. Once we go through the filing period and we know which contests are actually going to go to ballot, and we determine how many ballot types and voting precincts we have, then we take that pool of locations and officers, and now we are able to staff the locations. We pick the locations, we add the voting precinct to that location, and then we staff that location. So it's really important that that outreach occur in advance to collect election officers and polling locations. So currently, I believe we have about 400 active polling locations in the county, and is it like 5,000 active election officers? What's interesting is we usually use between 12 to 1,400 officers, and everybody can work, and then we get phone calls. The last 15 days leading up to the election, it looks like a ringing off the hook phone center in our precinct operations division. They bring on 5 temporary staff to help with those calls. And so there's 8 people fielding calls. If I can't work now, I can't do. So we go through that. And so we see a lot of people drop those couple of days before. So one of the earlier solutions we had thought of was a star election officer program where folks that maybe aren't assigned a location, they sign up to be extras. They can come to our office on election morning, and then as the calls are coming in saying that someone didn't show, we're able to deploy those folks out to fill those holes. So we've attempted 3 elections to do the star election officer program. We start with 100 people on that list. By the time we get to election day, we've ran out of people and we have holes, and we can only hope that we have the minimal of 3 to 4 officers at certain locations. So that's something that we do experience that we definitely need to make some improvements, but that's something that we've seen. So we want to encourage people to sign up to be election officers. We want to encourage them to be locations if they so desire. And then all of our outreach events, when our outreach team is out there, they have all of this information available to the public. So a few things that we are looking into to make this more robust is actually some of the admin team are going down to meet with Orange County because they have implemented single point addressing for their elections office. And they've went from portion precincts, which this might be foreign language that I'm sharing right now, to whole precincts. And so what they're experiencing is a better process of establishing polling locations and their vote center, but this is work that they've done prior that is allowing them to be more efficient. And with that, we've learned that the same company that does single point addressing is Experian, and it's actually known as a credit reporting agency. And something recently, and I actually think Solano County does this, is that you can utilize a credit reporting agency to also keep your voter rolls clean. We do not do that in San Joaquin County, and so we're having conversations with other elections offices to learn more about that. It's not something we're necessarily implementing, but it's something we want to look into because we know there's concerns about the voter rolls, and we want to do everything we can to have the cleanest voter rolls as possible and in compliance with the law. So you do that, right, John and Solano? Oh, you're not doing that. Okay, so we are looking at other registrar voters offices that are doing that, just to look at it as an option. Is it going to allow us to have a more robust information when it comes to the voter rolls? That's really all I have on the polling locations and the election officer applications, but I am happy to take questions on that as well.
Any questions? Yes.
Hi, and just to keep it on the same subject matter with the outreach, again, it's all marketing, advertising, getting out the message. It's all relative, right? Just to kind of get with the times, I'm pretty sure maybe you know this as a suggestion, unless your team hasn't thought about it. These can get lost. Once you give it, they either end up on the floor, trash, or just misplaced, or whatever you want to call it. Have you ever thought about the concept of a QR code? I mean, that's paperless, right? We all know what a QR code is. Okay, that's fine. I'm not asking for someone's opinion about it. I'm asking if they know about it, and if they don't know about it, I want you to kind of be practical, like your typical small business individual. Okay, you see them around town. How do they get their word out? They may not have 50 cards on them. Right. All right. So, by way of the decor, by way of they're branded, they'll have a QR code. They'll have the three big social media platform icons. So that delineates to the outside of the other, the prospect that, oh, I know how I can reach this guy.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Yeah,
By that communication. Maybe not by that one, but by this one or that platform. Okay? So it's immaterial whether or not a person is computer savvy, computer proficient, internet, likes the internet. That's immaterial. What you could presume 110% is that everyone has a smartphone, period.
Absolutely.
End of story. That's legitimate. Okay? So for the robust portion of your dialogue with the how to get the, this is fine, but I'm not saying don't discount this, but if you want to be more robust and you want to expand a little bit to get the message out, think of the signs of think with the times, and apply what some of the examples I've given you. QR code is definitely one of them, because you could just have a table with the banner with a big old QR code. Someone takes a picture of it. Everyone has a smartphone. That's the gateway. Okay, they don't even have to talk to us. They just have to just basically research it. Okay, and if they can't do that, then the other three social media platforms, and then of course there's always an internet address and an email. So that's a suggestion.
Thank you. Let me, for those who haven't had a chance to speak, before we leave this item number 2, Carol, anybody have any more? No questions? Yes.
I just want to
on two.
piggyback, I'd just like to piggyback on that. And super person-friendly, because not all apps are people-friendly. And the more buttons you put out there, we have Punjabi that come over here, they've got their citizenship, they can vote, does not mean they're computer savvy, So we have a lot to think about when it comes to an app. Make it super people-friendly.
Okay, that takes us to the third item for discussion only.
Is it okay if I add one little comment before we move to 3?
Absolutely.
Okay,
We want to hear
awesome.
from you.
So we did implement, just 2 weeks ago, we actually purchased the ability to use a QR code for everything that you're talking about. And so the team that we have, we are looking at all of that technology as we speak. I mean it in the nicest way, but this elections office has kind of been living in the past for quite some time. And so in my new role and the role of the team that we're building here at the Registrar of Voters Office, all of what you're mentioning, we're looking into all of that, and we hope in the coming months, as we have more of these meetings, that we can share all the great things that we're discovering and trying to implement. But then also, to Patricia's point, we do need to also think about, some people prefer the paper method, but then we have so many people that are preferring the electronic method. And then we just in the last 9 months launched our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We actually provided that link tonight on all of those pages so folks could dial in this evening and click on the link and get to this meeting this evening. So we are looking at that, but there is definitely work to be done. So I just wanted to add that so everyone was aware we're definitely looking at it.
Okay, state mandates in the California Elections Code. If anybody needs a 5-minute break, if not, we'll just go forward. All right, thank you.
So this is a familiar document here. This came from a presentation I gave September 27th of 2022. And this, we worked in collaboration with County Council to create this. And basically, it's just a flow chart showing you what is mandated and what is not mandated. But Supervisor Ding, he asked us to make this more user-friendly for you folks. So there's I think it's about 15 slides total that kind of goes through each of these topics in order to kind of break down what the code is saying. So we've provided that. So we're going to just go ahead and go through that. So the first one is hand counting ballots in lieu of utilizing a voting system. So the elections codes are all referenced up there. This text establishes that ballots set for manual counting at a central location should be transported according to sections 15201 and 15202. The count and tally should be done by precincts under the supervision of the elections official or authorized deputies, following procedures outlined in Article 5, commencing with Section 15270. Additionally, the governing board has the authority to adopt any type of voting system, combination of voting systems, or a mix of voting system and paper ballots for the use at elections. This, however, is subject to condition that the voting systems have been certified and are conditionally approved by the Secretary of State or specifically authorized by law according to Section 19209. The utilization of paper ballots only, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the Help America Act Vote Act of 2002, and Visually Impaired Voter Assistance Act of 1989. Help America Vote Act, which is also referred to as HAVA, is in line with this federal law. California ensures at least one accessible voting machine is available at each polling location, allowing disabled individuals to vote independently and privately. Visually Impaired Voter Assistance Act. In California, this act promotes the fundamental right to vote of visually impaired individuals. It encourages awareness of state voter information guide, audio recordings, and their delivery to these voters. This chapter mandates that election officials must start mailing out ballots to all registered voters. Elimination of vote by mail ballots. Sorry, Elections Code 3000.5. This chapter mandates that election officials must start mailing out ballots to all registered voters 29 days before each election with a 5-day period for dispatch. Voters can still vote in person despite receiving mail ballots. However, voters with an inactive registration status are not eligible to receive a vote by mail ballot. Elimination of ballot drop boxes, California Elections Code 3025.5. The regulations indicate that counties not conducting elections as per Section 4005 or 4007, those are the Voters' Choice Act mandates, must provide at least 2 vote-by-mail ballot drop-off locations within the election jurisdiction, or 1 location per 30,000 registered voters, depending on which yields more locations. For jurisdictions with fewer than 30,000 registered voters, at least 1 drop-off location must be provided. Drop-off locations should consist of secure, accessible, locked ballot boxes located near public transportation routes. They must be open during regular business hours beginning at least 28 days before the election day and on the election day itself. Additionally, at least 1 drop-off location must be an exterior drop box, accessible for a minimum of 12 hours per day. The term vote-by-mail drop-off location is defined in Section 3025 of the Elections Code. Imposition of the 1-day voting period. California Elections Code 3000.5, 3025.5, and 15101. This chapter mandates that elections officials must start mailing to all registered voters the 29 days before, same as the prior slide. The regulations also indicate that counties not conducting elections per the VCA model have to yield those numbers based on 30,000 registered voters. And then drop-off locations should consist of the secure, accessible, locked boxes. So this is the same stuff that applies for the 1-day voting period and what is required. Additionally, at least 1 drop-off location must be the exterior drop box. And then lastly, it goes on to say jurisdictions can start processing vote-by-mail ballots and signature verification and preparation for machine reading 29 days before the election. However, vote counts cannot be accessed or released until 8 p.m. on the election day, and no results should be released before the close of the polls. Penalize or disallow ballot harvesting. This is unpermitted. All vote-by-mail ballots must be voted on or before Election Day. After voting the ballot, it can be returned by mail or in person to the elections official, a member of a precinct board, or a vote-by-mail ballot drop-off location within the state. A voter unable to return the ballot can designate another person to do so, provided the ballot is returned before the close of polls on Election Day. The ballot must be received by the relevant authority before the close of the polls on Election Day. If returned to a location not in the issuing county, the ballot should be forwarded to the correct county within 8 days. So if John or Linda get any of my ballots, they're going to send them my way, and vice versa. We're going to send any ballots we receive. When you border other counties, you can get other ballots, believe it or not. So we do make sure that they get to the correct home. Elections officials must establish procedures to ensure the secrecy, security, confidentiality, and integrity of ballots and personal information. By March 1st, 2008, a system for tracking and confirming receipt of vote-by-mail ballots should be established and made available online or via toll-free number. So we have something called ballot tracks through the state, which is what has been implemented. Ballots must be delivered and in compliance with these rules to be counted. A person cannot receive compensation based on the number of ballots they return. Engaging in these criminal acts related to vote-by-mail ballots is punishable under Division 18. Imposition of ID required prior to voting. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993, Article 2, Section 2 of the California Constitution, California Elections Code, 2000, 2101, 2105, 2111, 12, 2150, 2154, and so on. So you see all of those listed there. Again, this presentation will be available on our website after tonight's meeting. This collection of text outlines various provisions of California law regarding voter registration and eligibility. Essentially, to vote in California, a person must be a U.S. citizen, a resident of California, not currently in prison for a felony, and at least 18 years old. 16-year-old and 17-year-olds can pre-register in the state of California, but they do not become active until their 18th birthday. The affidavit of registration requires personal information to establish the person as an eligible voter, such as a name, place of residence, date of birth, and state or country of birth. For identification purposes, the affiant provides either a valid driver's license number or the last 4 digits of their social security number. This is at the time they register, not at the time that they're voting. If they possess neither, the state does assign an identification number for the voter registration process. Imposition of ID requirement continued on with the same information. However, this does not impose an ID requirement at the time of voting, rather it is a measure for registration. The right to vote is established through registration and is not tied to presentation of ID at the polling place. This aligns with Section 2 of Article 2 of the California Constitution and federal laws like NVRA that emphasize accessibility of voting, thereby making it illegal to impose additional ID requirements at the time of voting. Moreover, under California New Motor Voter Program, opportunities for voter registration are increased, and the Secretary of State is responsible for determining voter registration eligibility, not the Department of Motor Vehicles. There is also a voter bill of rights ensuring various rights for voters, such as the right to cast a ballot if they're a valid registered voter, to cast a provisional ballot if their name isn't on the voting rolls, and to cast a secret ballot free from intimidation. This voter bill of rights emphasizes that the voting eligibility is tied to the status of being a registered voter, not presenting an ID during the actual voting process. Imposition of different standards on requirements related to voter rules. So this goes into 52 U.S. Code Chapter 205, known as the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. It is a federal law designed to increase the number of registered voters, remove barriers to their participation in the electoral process, and to ensure the accuracy and currency of official lists of eligible voters. We have motor voter registration. Section 2504 mandates that states offer voter registration opportunities at the same time as a driver's license application or renewal. I just want to add, I had to renew my driver's license here recently. It doesn't ask, do you want to update your voter registration? It asks, do you not want to? So unless you check the box that says, I don't want it to be updated, we're automatically going to get a notification from the DMV that you've changed your address. Our staff is going to look at that. They're going to have to send you a card for verification. So for anybody that goes and registers their car not at their actual address, it could kick you into a different precinct. So it's very important to know that. I do want to get some more education out there around that motor voter program because I don't think folks understand quite how it works. Mail registration, so Section 2505 permits individuals to apply to register to vote by mail using mail and forms developed by each state at the Elections Assistance Commission. So in our county, in our state, as we're aware, we are doing all vote by mail to everyone, and we still have the requirement for polling places. Agency-based registration under 20,506, states must offer voter registration opportunities at offices that provide public assistance and all offices that provide state-funded programs, primarily engaged in providing services to persons with disabilities. Prohibition of voter purges. Section 20,507 states that states may not remove registered voters from the rolls solely because of their failure to vote. Federal coordination. Section 20,508 requires the Federal Elections Commission, now the Election Assistance Commission, to develop a national mail voter registration form. It assists states in meeting the requirements of the law and to report to Congress on the effectiveness of the act. Note that while the NVRA sets a federal standard for voter registration procedures, individual states may implement additional measures or rules provided that they do not contravene federal law. Maintaining voter rolls or the list of registered voters is a critical part of the electoral process. In California, this is governed by the California Elections Code. Registration to be included on the voter rolls, individuals must complete the registration process. This includes providing the necessary information to verify their identity and eligibility, such as their name, address, date of birth, and driver's license number or last 4 digits of their social security number. Only eligible individuals should be included on the voter rolls. Eligibility requirements include being a U.S. citizen, a resident of California, and at least 18 years old by the day of the election. Not currently in state or federal prison, and not found mentally incompetent by a court. Confirmation of registration. After a person registers to vote, the county elections official sends a confirmation notice. If the notice is returned undeliverable, the individual's status may be changed to inactive. Voter file maintenance. The county elections officials are required to conduct regular maintenance of the voter rolls. This includes removing the registrations of deceased individuals, those who have moved out of the jurisdiction, and those who have lost their voting rights due to felony conviction or mental incompetence. Cancellation of registration. There are very specific circumstances under which a voter's registration can be canceled. These include at the request of the voter, if the voter dies, if the voter is declared mentally incompetent, or if the voter is convicted of a felony. Inactive voter status. Voters who have not voted in the past 4 years or whose election mail has been returned undeliverable may be moved to an inactive status. Inactive voters are still eligible to vote, but may be removed from the rolls if they do not vote in 2 consecutive federal general elections. Using change of address data from credit reporting agencies. As I mentioned earlier, this is what I was kind of talking about. We're just looking into this. There's not been a plan put in place, but we are vetting the information we're getting from other elections offices to see if this is going to help us with cleaner voter rolls. The plan is to begin contracting with consumer reporting agencies to gain access to change of address data. An innovative method that will be used in conjunction with what we already do with mailing the residency confirmation cards. So election code says you can do one or the other. But for us, and what I've heard is there are ROVs out there that are actually just doing both because it allows us to have more and more information to be able to keep up-to-date rolls. The county transition aims to streamline the operations and improve the accuracy of voter records. This move, however, doesn't come without regulations to ensure the protection of voters' information. The implementation of this method is guided by a comprehensive series of steps and regulations designed to ensure the security of the data. In doing so, San Joaquin County would be leveraging digital data resources to refine the process of maintaining accurate voter records, all while upholding strict commitment to voter privacy and data security. This initiative is not a noteworthy example of a balanced approach that combines administrative efficiency with robust protection for voters' personal information. And that's it. That's what I have.
Thank you. Let me do this. As far as this general state mandates, any of us have any questions of her? Did you have a question? Let's start over there.
When you were talking about the deceased, in the past year, I've heard a lot of comments, public comments in the Board of Supervisors meeting, talking about deceased receive ballots and they get mailed in. How do you weed them out?
We get notification from public health, and whenever we receive, because it has to be per elections code, you can't just call me and tell me, oh, such and such passed away, you need to take them off the rolls. We need to get legitimate confirmation, and so we receive that through public agencies and public health, and as we get those records, we get multiple reports sent from multiple agencies all throughout the month, and so we're consistently getting that information in and providing those updates. So that's how it's done currently by election code.
Regarding your solicitation of polling places, do you go to the ones who were doing it last year and ask them if they want to do it again, or how do you go about getting polling places?
So the cards that you have tonight are just for anyone new that's interested. For those that are already in our system and are an active polling location, they're going to get sent an interest card about 6 months before the election, and we're going to ask them, are you available on these dates? We're going to ask them, are they available for the primary and general election, in hopes that they give us that answer so that for the general, we'll have that information even sooner.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
With regards to the using change of address data from the credit reporting agencies, now we all know there's only 3 major ones, obviously, right? And I believe you said that the election code says that you guys could just use 1, but you're trying to bunk it up to 2. Is that right?
We can use a credit reporting agency, doesn't specify which. What we're going to do is there's a voter notification card that gets sent out 90 days before every election. We're going to keep that card and do the reporting agency is our goal. But election code says we can do one, or we don't have to do both. We can do one or the other. Our intention is if we implement the credit reporting agency that we're going to do that on top of what we're already doing. And I have a few counties that have shared that with me, so that's what we're looking into.
And in the course of that, you guys are going to use proper discernment because, about a year ago, one of those big major credit reporting agencies that's made news. It made headways. Suffered a major data breach. So just
That's why we're looking into it.
you
We're
know
not
what I mean?
100% sure yet.
I don't
if
want
it's-
to say any names, Experian, but
Yeah.
okay, you know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah.
And those are things you have to look at, right? Because we are talking voter
So if
data.
you're gonna sell that to to your audience, to the public, you may want to, so they won't lose confidence. So you guys gonna go with Experian, for example? You may want to think of TransUnion, and there's only 3.
Right.
So okay,
Well,
thank
We're
you.
looking into all of them.
All right, thank you.
As far as this general state mandates, anyone else? Yes.
I'm curious, what is your retention rate on people who work at the polls?
I have people that have been in our system like 25 years. I've had people that have been here for a long time, and we get new folks all the time. But and we also have a student election officer program, so we get kids 16 and 17 that work as student workers with the other poll workers, and so we introduce it to them early. And we've seen people start as a student poll worker, and they're retired, and they're still a poll worker. So we do have quite a few returning folks that we know by name just because they've been with us so long.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I have just a couple of quick questions. I know everyone's anxious. It's hours getting late, but as far as the state mandates monitoring of drop box locations, are cameras prohibited? I'll tell you why. I'm one of those dumb people who ran for election, and I was actually at one of those drop boxes, and they were dropping bundles in. And I know we had a conversation previously that there's no follow-up on people. They're required to sign if they're delivering someone else's ballot, and we are not enforcing that. If they're not signed, we don't do anything about it. Is that correct?
Because we won't know about it. I would say to that point, if you guys ever see that situation occurring, let us know which location. Call my office. And I don't know how much we can do based on state law, but we're going to definitely, if you say, hey, Olivia, that location over at such and such a grocery store, I just seen somebody dump a whole load in there, and we get that ballot box back that evening because we're picking up daily, I will look into it to the best of my ability. That doesn't mean I can go arrest a bunch of people or anything like that, but at least I can look into it. And something that I share is, if I don't know about it, then I can't do anything about it. And so even ballot harvesting, we had a few wonderful candidates this last cycle, and I was informed that they were going to participate in some ballot harvesting at events. And so I made sure that when I knew about it, I sent them a courtesy letter saying, hey, dear candidate, I just wanted to share with you, like, hey, make sure you're following all the rules, and you need to have these ballots signed in the authorized agent box and all of those different things. So it's something we're going to constantly be doing, and that's part of our duty.
Okay, but cameras aren't prohibited?
They're not prohibited. What we try to do in our county is we do have a camera in front of this drop box here, and the locations that we choose, we try really hard to choose locations where it's like a grocery store or something that already has camera footage. A story, if it's okay to share real quick, is we had a drop box location out in Lathrop, and our team went out and seen it, and the seals on the front of it had been tampered with. So our IT team went out there, and they asked the store owner, can we look at the footage? And they did. And come to find out, it was the store owner's 2 little boys that was messing around with the drop box. And so as soon as we're there watching, they're pointing at you, no, it was my brother, it was my brother. So we can look into things. And so we work, again, with our community to ensure that we have that. We could purchase cameras for every box, and we could try to do that, but it would be a near impossible task. So it's important to use those community resources to be able to establish that.
Okay, now we have established our next meeting for the 10th.
John had something.
Well, it was just a point about the drop boxes. The code is really specific that there's something called a drop box that sits out there by itself, is unattended, right? You've seen those. But there's also allowance for drop-off locations. And if you switch to the vote center model, you're kind of locked into having drop boxes. If you stay with poll places, you have some flexibility and you can do more drop-off locations. And a drop-off location really just means it's a box that's staffed and monitored by people. That's kind of what we chose in Solano County to have that.
That's
and that avoids
interesting.
the
That's
camera
good to
coming.
know.
Just a point. That's
Our debate again. Our outside boxes, we have cameras on all of them. And then our indoor boxes, like Olivia mentioned, are in stores that have their own camera footage. And then we also have manned drop boxes. So we have a variety of different options, even in the Voters' Choice Act.
All right, and everyone's going to take an opportunity to review the presentations. If there's something just burning questions. You, as a committee, will be setting the agenda, so you'll tell me, and I'll present an agenda, and then we'll vote on the agenda. We'll make any additions that are necessary at our next meeting. But if we find it compelling to have a meeting before then, we're not precluded from doing that. So if there's something that jumped out from these presentations that you might want to do, then they're going to have to be a majority of the people that want to have it. If 2 or 3 people call me and say, I want to have a meeting, I'm going to tell you, you're number 2. There's no one else, so we won't have an extra meeting. With that, I know we're required to have a quorum. What constitutes a quorum? Can you tell us on, what do we have, 11 members? I was asking you because Supervisor Ding, I think there's an odd number. There aren't, I think there's, how many total? Does anybody here know the total number of members we have? Oh, there are 10? I thought there were 11. Okay. All right, we'll figure that out. We want to stay within the law. Is there, before we, I guess we're going to public comment now, if anybody has any public comments. Through the,
I was just going to say, through the chair, if you wanted an answer, county council is here, a representative from their office about the quorum question, but only if you want that answer. If not, I'll get out of the way for public comment.
yes, but we have public comment here, and they might want to ask you questions through me, through the chair. So let's just start at the left. You're limited to 1 question. Oh, if you're going to make a statement, how long is it?
3 minutes.
Okay, we'll take 3 minutes.
Is this the spot? Or can I go up there?
That's good. If that microphone works, that's good. Unless you want to be up in front where everyone can see you better.
All right, thank you. I appreciate being here. Thank you so much. It was a long wait. My name is Rhea Jones, and I really have high hopes for this body under the leadership of Supervisor Steve Ding that will answer a host of questions that citizens have about the election process in our county. Number 1, I created a survey and spent a day at Lodi Street Fair and collected 151 surveys and another 27 surveys at local meetings, and 52 were collected at the Cherry Blossom Festival. We will do it again at the Watermelon Festival in Manteca. We disseminated the results and have the latest data available for you here. And if I may, maybe after I'm done talking, I can give them to the members here. And it really shows, the data shows that what people on the street really think. It's not what we hear in the news. It's not what maybe our supervisors or our representatives thinks, but it's the average citizen in our county. And I think you'll be surprised to see the results. I don't have time to talk about them, but I will actually share them with you physically. Also, I became motivated to look at the voter rolls, especially after the Kahn case, and found plenty of dead people voting and ghost voters. I am desperately puzzled, and how did this happen? I really wonder about that. I am no tech whiz by any stretch of the imagination, but I will offer you personally to show you what I have and how I find the information and what steps I go through to find the information. It's real and it must be fixed, so our county voter rolls corrections remain in place permanently even at the state level. I know the state and the county share. Olivia actually shared that information with me months ago. The committee needs to research the process, read the fine print, open the book, step by step become proficient in how things happen from start to finish, including the reconciliation of elections, and ask yourself, why don't the numbers match? Again, something that I heard at the Board of Supervisors meeting. And also, almost is not good enough. Point 3 I'd like to say is also doing away with the neighborhood precincts, which we've spent the last hour listening to, and opening voter centers allows for more opportunity for fraud. And I know this because I see the voter rolls and I see what's going on myself personally. Elections belong to the people. I really believe that. They belong to the people, not the county and not the government. The people hire the officials and the county employees. The employees work for us. And so for the people to be pushed out of the election process is very scary to me. They will be forced to accept any result or explanation given by government officials, just like this committee. We all want to be involved. We all want citizens like you and I to be part of our election process. Transparency is critical. I'm asking all of you to become apolitical and just do the work and let facts and evidence lead you to the truth, solutions, and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I pass these out?
Yes, there's no reason you can't pass them out, but if there's anyone else, would you please go to the front? Anyone else have any comments? Oh, you have a question? Yeah, you can ask it of us all. Okay. Yeah, we're recording.
So that way, everybody out there gets a chance to hear your voice as well.
As Ms. Hale pointed out, the law requires only U.S. citizens to vote. So my question is, how does the office ensure compliance, making sure that only citizens do register to vote? Thank you.
Can you state your name, please?
My name is Michaela Rob.
Thank you. There's no more comments? No. I can't see behind my back, so. Yes. Hi.
My name is Molly Watkins. I'm from the Linden area, and I want to give you one chapter of a book that is free online. It was called The Black Box Voting by Bev Harris, and it's, for everybody else, blackboxvoting.org. It was printed in 2004. There's 16 chapters. In the first 8 chapters, California is mentioned 5 times. And why I think you, between now and August, should thumb through this book is because you're much like me, although I'm in front of you because I went down this path much sooner than you did. Watching previous elections, having election experience, working on campaigns and stuff, you anticipate your candidates to win based on enthusiasm around the community and the people voting. And in 2020, with the election, you watched it, and the person who won didn't have that enthusiasm. So it's like, well, that's very odd. How did that happen? So patiently going through odds and ends, articles and whatnot, led me down the path and found this book called Black Box Voting. And it was written in 2004, long before many of the machines that we have now were used. And you can tell from reading this that the system is sideways. The voting system is inefficient, fraudulent, created to chase your tail. I don't know what other adjectives you can use, but you'll have to read through this. It's a very simple read. I think if you just flip through it, you'll like, oh, wow. If you go to her website to find the other 15 chapters, and again, it's a free book, if you scroll to the bottom, there are some additions to it, and there's a couple stories. One of them is about California elections. So you'll find those interesting. Every which way you can think of, there is fraudulent stuff going on. So what I'm asking you is to take all that in and help us in San Joaquin County find a way to eliminate the election questionabilities and to find transparencies. Figure out the California law where we can skate into spots where we can do things and confidently know that the ballots we're counting are real ballots from real people that voted. And it's a big task, but I think there's lots of us that can help you, and we can work together and try to figure this craziness out. So, thank you for your time.
Does anybody have any questions? If not, please state your name.
Okay, just a second, Carol. I'm a teacher by profession, and I have a handout for you guys.
State your name, please.
Holly Moore. Here you go. Take one down and pass it around, 99.
Bottle of beer.
That's right. Okay. So, all right. I'm providing a handout for you on the resource on the topics for tonight, and this is for your personal resources source. Some of you may be new to the topic of election integrity, so this is a place for you to start. And I didn't make enough for everybody in the whole room, not knowing we'd have such a crowd, but it's mostly for the committee. So good evening, my name is Holly Moore, and on the ROV's website it reads that their office is responsible for conducting fair, impartial, accurate, secure, and transparent elections. Secure and transparent, that's what we want, which is good because we as citizens pay for every part of the election process, right? It belongs to us, so nothing should be hidden from us, and everything should be transparent. Nothing was hidden from us with paper ballots and a hand count, but now with computers, this becomes harder and harder because how many of us are computer programmers who understand the code inside the election computers? If we can't read code, then it's not transparent. Look what just happened in Shasta County 3 months ago. A whistleblower named Clint Curtis testified against the computers in Shasta County. Clint is a top computer guy in the United States, and he was asked to write a code to cheat in the election, to cheat. He said it only took 10 lines of code to throw an entire election. He says that all systems have backdoors to get in and fix things. And would you know if cheating code was inside our computers? Would you know? Would any of you know if someone was taking advantage of the backdoors into your system? No. Then it's not transparent or secure. And what's worse is that the code is proprietary, which means Heart Verity, our computer system, won't let us see the code. This is bad. In fact, it's the opposite of transparent. And to make it worse, the Voters' Choice Act is even more secretive. The elections are taken out of our hands and centralized for the sake of, quote, convenience. This decreases visibility and citizen control. Look what just happened in Maricopa County, Arizona. They have the VCA. The counting machines were rigged to jam in 60% of the Republican areas. Election workers said, well, just throw the ballots in these unsecured boxes and we'll count them when we get back to the office. The ballots got mixed up with already counted ballots, and the chain of custody was broken. And because of the jamming, people stood in line for 5 or 6 hours waiting to vote, with many had eventually had to leave. Voters were disenfranchised, but this would never happen with paper and a hand count. And why do we need fancy machines? Because all we need to do to tally is count 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 ballot. That's all. It's simple addition. It's hard, and it doesn't require multi-million-dollar machines and fancy code, which we're not allowed to see. Speaking of which, the ERIC system, which the Secretary of State of California is providing, takes it one more level out of our view. In February 2023, the Secretary of State of Alabama went to visit the ERIC headquarters in Washington, D.C., and found, you would think the office would be busy and full of computers and stuff. He found that the office was empty. It was a shell. There was nobody there. So this sent off warning signals to the 31 states using the ERIC system, and 8 states have since dropped it, but California is trying to adopt it when others are fleeing. ERIC system was originally promoted as a tool to clean up voter rolls. It is anything but that. For example, Wisconsin is an ERIC state and has over 7 million registered voter in a state with less than 4 million eligible voters. They have more registered voters than eligible voters. How is that? That's ghosts and dead people and non-citizens on their ballot. What is more? Okay, so obviously ERIC isn't working. The ERIC system is obsolete, inefficient, and has failed in its purpose. And we aren't allowed to see ERIC's code either. So we cannot have the VCA or the ERIC systems. We must hand count the ballots on election day, and that's the only way that we can secure our elections. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'm going to make a comment as a member of the public, if it's okay. I wanted to ask a question on discussion item 2 on the polling locations, just to understand and clarify why the recruitment of like the Adopt Civics group or a church those can't be secured until only 6 months prior to the election. That's my comment. Thank you. Sure. Nicole Gehring.
So right now with the current model that we have, that's the process that was in place before I took position that I have now. So I've actually had quite a few conversations with John and what they're doing with the adopt the poll model and stuff. So that's not fallen on deaf ears. We're looking into that and how we can improve systems. So I want you to know that we will diligently look into that and any information that comes from this committee to see what we can do to improve. But because we don't know, we can send out the cards now, but a lot of times folks don't get them back to us. And so what we found in the last couple of elections is sending those cards out 6 months before is a pretty good spot to get a good return on those cards. But to establish which locations we're going to use, that can't happen until we know what's gone to ballot because of our current process.
Does that answer your question? Is that good, Nicole?
Yes, in Solano County, are you doing it ahead of time?
Yeah, so since about 2012, we decided to keep the same polling places for every election. And the voters are always assigned to that location regardless of what the ballot composition is. So we kind of separated the process out. So we just kind of make personal visits to these locations and just make sure they're still on board and they're not going to have a construction project or something like that. We might have a 1 or 2% change per election when that happens. You know, buildings close or they're renovating. But for the most part, 95% exact same location. We know we're locked in, and we still have to have a communication with them about it, but it's maybe a little more personal.
Okay, thank you. Now, the Election Advisory Committee, any member comments, it's not mandatory, but if you have anything, let's start over here with our scribe. Any?
Scribe, I heard that, scribe of God. Nothing, I like this committee. I feel really warm and fuzzy already. It's like I kind of know what's going on here, so, thank you.
John?
I hope the district attorney is invited to offer their comments. I would like to hear their opinion on between the two choices, so that's my only real comment.
No, not right now, but thank you.
No comment.
Just thank you for providing the information. I look forward to reviewing all of it. Thank you for being here, and look forward to asking more questions and learning more in the future. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you also for providing all the information tonight. It was a ton of stuff. Some stuff we got prior, which was nice to have. Thank you for that as well. I think we have a lot to read and get it together, and I agree, this is a good group. I think this is a group that pays attention and will ask the right questions. Thank you.
All right, with some great assistance, number 4, discuss topics, issues to be considered by the EAC at future meetings in 2023 and 2024. Discussion only. No action to be taken. The only thing that I had suggested is that we review the presentation in case someone thought we had to have a meeting before so we could discuss them. But if there are any other topics or issues that for future meetings you might want, I will put them on the agenda unless it's going to be so long that we have to have a special meeting for it. Anything else with that?
Through the chair, I do have one question. If there's anything, so I'm going to be here to support as much or as little, and I don't always need to be up here presenting or a part of what's going on, but if there's information needed from my office, the sooner you can get those requests to me, because you know we're just going to start continuing to get busier with the election. I want to make sure we're producing good quality documents for all of you if there is something. So as soon as you get a finalized agenda, if you could be sure to send that my way so that I can get our staff involved in whatever you need from us so that we can be of service to the committee.
Absolutely.
So if I have questions as I go through this, can I direct them to Mr. Amador and he'll direct them to you?
I'd prefer that so I can have knowledge of what's going on. So I won't have a whole committee sending her questions. I'm not a screener, just want to know what's going on. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved, second? Second. Any objections? If there are no objections, we stand adjourned.
Yeah.